Over the next few minutes, I want to give you a 6-step hack that'll help you understand the Bible. Hunter and William, two Bible professors, they use a good analogy for reading the Bible well. They put it like this: understanding the context of Scripture. It's like reading the directions before playing a board game. If you know the rules, the game will make sense, and you might even enjoy it. But if you don't learn the rules, it's frustrating and you don't want to play. So I want to help you learn the context of the Bible so you can love to play the game. The first context is historical. Every passage of Scripture emerges in the course of history, which is why in order to read the Bible in context, we need to read it in its historical context. So when thinking about the original audience, we should distinguish between the original characters and the original readers. So that means this: a story about Abraham, he's the original character, but the original readers are those following Moses in the desert. Here's the key idea. Historical context is informed by both these groups. Who's the original character or characters, and who are the original readers? Next is the cultural context. And this includes the original cultural circumstances that gave rise to the book, as well as the cultural features of the time. As an example, in Revelation 3, 15 through 16, the Laodicea church is described as neither hot nor cold. This reflected the cultural features of two nearby cities. Hierapolis had hot springs that were of medicinal value, while Colossae had cold springs that brought nourishment and refreshment. The Laodicea water was lukewarm, tasteless, useless. The cultural features informed the historical circumstances. And so the spiritual life of the church had become like our city water, useless. Next is the literary context. And this means reading the text in its literary context involves interpreting it in light of the flow of words and the form the words take. Words mean something in the sentences, paragraphs, and books in which they're used. That's why we don't start reading a novel in the middle. How can you know if you're Team Edward or Team Jacob if you don't start at the beginning? And yet we often approach the Bible in that way. Second, properly reading the Bible in its literary context means considering the literary forms the author chooses. Let me give you a few examples. There are discourse texts in the Bible. These are words spoken from one person to another, conversational. There are narrative texts, which are telling a story. There are poetic texts that paint a picture through images. Understanding the form helps us interpret the context. So 3 specific contexts to recognize: historical, cultural, and literary. Next are the 3 general contexts. And first up is the close context. The close context. Here we're looking down at the page. We're seeking to understand the words in their immediate context. This kind of context includes the chosen words, communicated ideas, and the specific book we're reading, understanding that all within its historical setting. Here we're paying attention to both the divine and human intent in the passage. Next is the continuing context. Since the Bible was written over time in several centuries, we have to look back at the story to discover how a given passage relates to what precedes it. We need to discern the deeper shape and the flow of the story, the movement, how the story or passage relates to the redemptive plan of God. And then lastly is the complete context, where we're looking ahead. First, by the promise fulfillment theme, which centers on Jesus, and second, through what's called typology. So these are the 6 contexts of the Bible. Now that you know the rules, go play the game.